Welcome to Modern Farm Business Podcast. This podcast is designed to help the farm leader bring their business to the next level. We'll cover everything from leadership and finance to strategy and planning. I'm your host, Dean Hefta. In business and in life, one of the most important elements is that of trust. When trust is high, everything works faster, people have more energy, and everything is more fun. Think about a relationship that you have that is high in trust. Doesn't it seem like more gets accomplished, and when you're getting stuff done, it's more fun together? But when trust is low, everything slows down. We second-guess decisions, we question motives, and in the words of Ralph Waldo Emerson, our distrust is very expensive. The bottom line is when trust is low, the speed of what we do goes down and the expenses go up. So we can agree that trust is important. But too often, that's where our thinking about trust stops. We think it's binary. I either trust them or I don't trust them. But trust is much more dynamic than that. Today, we're going to dig into the elements of trust so you can build better business relationships and maybe have a better understanding of why you have some reservations with some people. So let's get started. What I've found is one of the most important things to be self-aware of in a relationship is why there may be a trust issue. And I've found it's easier when I can break it down into the components. We're going to be talking about 4 components of trust today. In the relationship, there may be one of these that is the root of the issue, or it could be many of them that are causing the problem at the same time. The first element is that of competency. This is really our focus on understanding of the abilities, the knowledge, and the know-how of the other person. For example, I have a very trusting relationship with my wife. However, because competency is very situational, there are situations where I would not and I should not trust her. For example, she weighs a lot less than I do. And if we were to have her tie a rope around her and around me, and I was going to ask her to hold me while I rappel down a mountain face, there would be very low trust between us. And it's not because I don't believe she's going to do her best and she's going to try her hardest and wants to do the right thing, but because physics are against us. She simply doesn't have the capability or the competency to do what I'm asking her to do. And because of that, I have, in that situation, low trust for her ability to perform the task. That doesn't mean that I don't trust her. So when we're understanding how competency plays into the role, first, we have to ourselves know enough about the area that we're asking somebody to perform in or to do a task for us to be able to judge and evaluate, do they have the competency we need? What happens if we have zero interest in learning anything about that area and they say, yes, I can do this, and they fail? It's easy for us to blame them, but the reality is we have a responsibility to know just enough to know if that person has the capabilities, the competencies, and the know-how to perform the task that we're looking for. And that's on us. The next element is that of character. Boy, this is a biggie. If you're working with somebody who is competent and knowledgeable, but you have an experience where maybe you've seen them take shortcuts for their own benefit, or you've seen where they're willing to tell a little lie to make themselves look better, you begin questioning their character. When we think about character, we think about qualities of a person that are just very embedded in them, the consistency of their behavior, the motives that they carry into their actions. The character element is a tough one, though, because it's really the one that's most at risk of being misassigned. Because often when we see a behavior, we then make assumptions about the motives and the intentions that are behind that behavior. And if we don't have a deep relationship with the person, we may not be giving them the benefit of the doubt. So when we're evaluating character, we have to recognize there's a big part of us that we're applying to others. We're very different people from each other, and we've had different experiences and different backgrounds and different perceptions. So when I see somebody doing something in a certain way that is very different than I would do it, I have a choice. I can seek to understand where they're coming from and how they're approaching it and why they're doing it like that. Or I can just say, if I was doing that, I know what my motives would be, and they wouldn't be good. You see, I began putting myself onto them. So when we're looking at the character element, we really have to be cautious of how much of ourself we're putting into that judgment and meet them where they're at to get a better understanding of what is their consistency of behavior. What have other people in their life experienced? Is this something that's out of place for them? So we first have to seek to understand before we jump into judgment. Third is communication trust. This is an interesting piece of the puzzle because it's the one that most people don't see, but actually is the one that causes much of the distrust that crops up in relationships. Think about it like this. You're looking for somebody to work on your furnace. A friend says to call a guy that he knows named Tim, that he does good work. You reach out to Tim and say you'd like him to take a look at your furnace sometime. He says he'll stop by when he's in your area so that he doesn't end up charging you an extra service call. You say, great. About a week later, you begin wondering, has Tim forgotten about me? Your assumption when he said he'd stop by is that it would be pretty soon, within the next few days. So you keep waiting and he doesn't show and doesn't call. You begin questioning this guy's integrity. Maybe he can't keep his word. Maybe he's disorganized. We start assigning all kinds of things to him. Ultimately, you feel your trust in this guy that you don't know is evaporating. But the reality was, this is a communication issue. Because you didn't establish shared expectations at the very beginning of what's next and what you should expect of each other and what the needs are on each side, you begin slipping into this area of communication distrust. What Tim didn't share and what you didn't know is that Tim's small company is swamped right now with a huge project that has him and his crew working an hour in a different direction for the next 10 days. When he didn't sense urgency in your voice and you simply said, sometime I'd like you to take a look at it, he began assuming it's not urgent and you aren't pressing to have somebody look at it. And to save a service call, you're content to wait for him to be in your area, which is going to be in a couple of weeks. This is an example of how quickly poorly established expectations, because of miscommunication, can spill into all kinds of trust issues. And it happens under the surface. We don't even see the communication being the issue. It happens in schools, it happens in churches, it happens in organizations, it happens in communities. All kinds of stories crop up because people are filling in the blanks due to miscommunication or misunderstanding. So as ourselves, it's our responsibility on our side of the equation to establish to the best of our ability clarity in the communication. Who's going to do what? When's it going to be done by? Why are we doing this? What can you expect next? The more clear we can negotiate those things and the more clear we can have them established, the more likely communication isn't going to spill over into trust issues in other areas. The final of the four is capacity, or simply how able are we to trust others? I know people who simply say they don't trust most people they meet, and it takes a long time for them to be able to extend trust to anybody. In this case, it isn't an event or competency that's at work. It's the individual's personal decision to not extend trust. And this reluctance can, in its own way, lead to missed opportunities, fewer strong relationships, and maybe even a more stressful way of life. Now, the flip side of this lack of capacity to trust is people that trust everybody in every situation. They think they should just trust anybody and take them at their word. And this is really naive trust. We've just turned off our brain and decided we're not going to make mature evaluations of things like competency or character. But in this mode, we end up getting burned or taken advantage of and eventually find ourselves bitter and victimized. When we look at the capacity to trust, it's important to take a smart approach, a balanced view of people's motives, to develop enough knowledge to be able to judge their abilities, and to work diligently to establish clear expectations at the beginning. This mature capacity means having self-awareness of our own limits and our tendencies, and knowing how to balance advocating for our needs without sacrificing the relationships that we have with others. So the 4 elements of trust: competency, character, communication, and capacity. I hope this episode has gotten you thinking about how you can approach trust in your life in a different way. If you have questions, ideas, or any thoughts, be sure to email them to me at dean@modernfarmbusiness. As always, thank you so much for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you again next week.